What do I do if there's an office love triangle? I feel like I need a relationship coach to help me answer this one. So first off, don't date coworkers. Also, I'm incredibly hypocritical because my husband was a coworker and we dated and now we're married. So take that with a grain of salt. If you're going to date a coworker, if I were you, I would keep that to yourselves as long as possible, unless you thought you were going to get married. It causes a lot of unnecessary drama to have a bunch of your coworkers weighing in on your relationship. Just my advice. Also, if you're going to date people you work with, don't date multiple people that you work with. I feel like that goes without saying, but I'm going to say it because clearly it's happening somewhere. Don't date multiple people that you work with. Welcome back to Secrets of a Corporate Game. So many people are trying to navigate a corporate world that is laden with secrets, cleverly hidden and unspoken rules to a game that most employees don't even know they're playing. On this podcast, we try to give you a peek behind the curtain and unveil some of those secrets with tips and tricks that you can apply today to start taking control of your career and progress up the ladder faster. I am so excited for today's podcast episode. We are talking about your anonymous questions. I know it can be really challenging in the corporate environment to get advice on situations without seeming incredibly biased, right? Maybe we don't like our boss, or we have a coworker we struggle with, or we're trying to navigate being a manager for the first time. There are lots of questions that you cannot ask at work. I wish you could, but you can't. So today we are going through some of the anonymous questions that you guys asked on Instagram stories a couple of weeks ago. And we are going to go through and I'm going to give you some advice on what to do. If you listen to this episode and you're like, man, I have situations I could use some help from, you can always go to my website, thatcareercoach.net, and submit your question on my website directly for my podcast. And we will answer them here, usually every other month. That way you guys get the support that you need. So the first question that we have is how to manage a low performer who genuinely tries their best, but isn't getting where they need to go. My answer is not going to be popular. Okay. When you have an employee who is underperforming and they have good work ethic, they are leaning in, they are trying, it probably comes down to the way that you are assigning work rather than the way that the employee is trying to deliver it. Okay. Now, there are plenty of low performers who are not trying their hardest. They are not working effectively. They are not improving themselves. There are plenty of low performers who deserve to be fired and go find a job that's a better fit for them. Absolutely. But in this particular case, they're genuinely trying their best and they just can't get there. There's a couple things as a manager that you can do that will help. So the first is that success in an assignment does not start when they deliver it to you. It starts when you assign it. Feel free to print that on a t-shirt. Okay. When you assign work to your employees, you need to give them a few different pieces of information. So first off, you need to give them context. What is the problem we're trying to solve? Don't say, hey, can you send me data? Say, hey, I got an ask for this. I need this data to answer that question. Give context. That's step one. All right. Step two is you're going to give a deadline. Every single time. Every time. Do not wait until it is a fire drill to give deadlines. This is the big mistake I see, especially with first-time managers, is we say, well, I don't have to have it by a certain date, so just get to it when you get to it. Everybody's idea of how long things takes is different. You have to set an expectation of a deadline when you assign work every time. Something that I often do when I assign work is I will assign a deadline and milestone checkpoints, especially if I have a low performer, right? So, hey, by next Friday, we need to be able to answer this question. Here's the data that I need, and here's kind of how I think it needs to be structured. I'd like to check in with you Thursday of this week and Wednesday of next week to make sure we're on track so that we can hit that deadline. Managers don't like to do this because it takes more of our time. And we don't want to give up more of our time. I get it. But you're going to end up having to do it yourself if they do it wrong anyways. So setting those checkpoints gives them, okay, well, I have to have something to show by Thursday. So I can't wait to start it until next week. I have to start it this week. I have to be able to show something on Thursday. So at least I could build a shell of what I'm going to build. I could pull in the raw data. We could talk about it. Great. Now we've made progress. Then the next Wednesday, that's kind of our final checkpoint before it's due. So you want to have it mostly ready by Wednesday. So now they're going to clean up. They're going to make all the changes from the Thursday before. It's all going to look good. You're going to do a review. You're going to make final tweaks so that Friday, what they deliver you is correct. All right. So if you're dealing with a low performing employee, you have to give context. You have to give expectations of a deadline and milestone check-ins. And lastly, you need to give them points of reference for support. So if they have questions about this, do they come to you? Do they go to the person who owns the data? Do they go to a coworker? Do they go to somebody else on your organization? Do they go to somebody else on your team? Who is the escalation point? Most people do not want to ask their boss a bunch of questions. We hate doing that. We feel like it means we failed. Now, I would argue you should be asking your boss tons of questions anyways. But that aside, you should be focused on where they can escalate to. So if you have questions about the data, here's the person who owns that data source. If you have questions about the output, feel free to come to me. If you need support in some of the calculations, work with John. He did something similar a couple months ago. Give them those points of triage so that they feel empowered to ask the right questions to stay on the right timeline. That's where you need to give them more support. All right. That is going to ultimately set them up for success. If they don't know where to go, or they don't know when to go, and they don't know who to go to, they're going to sit on it, right? Especially younger generations. They'll say, oh, I didn't know what you wanted, so I didn't do it. I hear this all the time from managers that I coach, from employees who work for me. Proactivity is kind of the secret sauce that we learn as we get more senior. Most new people don't know it. So if they're not being proactive, give them the routes to be proactive with. Give them the milestones, give them the resources, give them the context, right? So there's that. The second flip side of this is you need to give true, honest, constructive feedback that is tied to themes in their performance. We're going to break this down, all right? Do not give feedback every time somebody does something wrong. It's very annoying. It's tiring. It feels micromanaging. People hate it. Identify themes in their performance that you can bucket feedback under. So for example, proactivity is one of my favorites. You've missed the last few deadlines. The last few products were not what I needed them to be. You showed up to this meeting unprepared. Hey, I've noticed a lack of proactivity in your performance. What I mean by this is I'm not seeing you attempt things or lean in to deliver things without being prompted. A couple of examples where I've seen this is I assigned you this project. While I didn't give you a deadline, you never did it. Nor did you ask me any questions about what I needed. This meeting, you showed up unprepared, even though you had scheduled it and you were on deck to be the agenda and presenter. I need you to show proactivity ahead of those calls so that you're prepared to show others the work that you do well. The last way that I've been able to witness this is that when you're working with your peers, oftentimes you will delegate work but not complete your portion, right? The theme is proactivity. Here's how it shows up. One that managers, I think, overuse is we say, hey, I've noticed you need to work on your communication. But then we don't tell them what that means. Okay. So with the theme of communication, it needs to be specific. I've noticed that the way you disagree in meetings comes off as anti-collaborative. It's not actually leaning into the objectives we're trying to accomplish. I've noticed that the way your written communication looks in emails is too abrupt. You need to be following a stronger template that's more emotional, that's more connecting. I've noticed that your collaboration with team members, they often give feedback that you're not open to feedback. We need to work on that. How would you be receiving this? What's your preferred method? Like with communication, we got to give specific examples. So popular themes are proactivity, communication, adhering to deadlines, right? Understanding the data. So if you have a data specific role, like, hey, your attention to detail is not there, right? These are big themes that I see very commonly. So when you are giving feedback, make sure that you're tying it to a theme and you're giving specific examples. The other side of this is that you have to be honest. So many managers do not tell employees what's actually happening. Okay. Now I will admit, I probably over pivot. I probably overshare with my team exactly what's going on and how I feel about each of them. That's a love-hate thing. Now, people who've worked for me multiple companies, of which there are many, love that. They want to know what's going on. If you are to the point where you're thinking somebody's going to have to go on a performance plan or a PIP or they're going to get fired, they need to know that explicitly. Right? So I've had conversations with team members before where I said, hey, I've seen this theme. This is the examples that have happened. I'm going to be honest with you. If you cannot turn this around, you're going to go on a performance plan and ultimately be fired. And it won't matter that I like you as a person or that I think you're capable of doing the work. If you can't show me that you're capable of changing this, I need to see this for you to be able to continue working for me effectively. Now, this conversation should take place months before a performance plan, months before a firing. It should be a very targeted conversation that gives them time and opportunity to actually improve. If you wait until they're getting fired, it's too late. Don't do that. Okay? So make sure that you're targeting that specifically. The other piece with this is you also shouldn't threaten in your feedback, right? So that example where I gave said, hey, it won't matter if I think you're great, if I think you're capable. I know this individual. I do think they're great and capable. If you cannot turn this around, you will end up fired. This is not, I'm going to fire you if you don't do this. These are very different conversations. Okay. The manager who threatens, oh, you're stupid. You're not doing this right. Still, you're going to get fired. Like, no, don't be that person. But if the performance is low enough that that's a legitimate concern of yours, they deserve to know that that's where they're headed if they can't fix the problem. Because once it goes to HR, it's done. It's too late, right? Even if they turn it around, they have that in their reputation. They'll never recover from it. So figure out the balance of giving strong, constructive feedback. And then the follow-up is, hey, I have noticed since that conversation, you've been doing so much better. Here's some examples where I see this improving. I'd like to keep this momentum going. I want to keep you going in that right direction. Inconsistency is another big theme that I see where, hey, I'm really good when I'm on and I'm really bad when I'm not on, right? That requires frequent touchbacks of, hey, we talked about inconsistency being a theme I want you to work on. You did really great on this project. You're really struggling on this one. I need you to be on all the time, right? One example that I often give is like, this is not school. If you make a mistake in school, you get a low grade and it's okay because all your other high grades make up for it. Corporate does not work that way. One big mistake can be the end of your job. It just can. So we have to be on all the time. All right. So I think I've answered that one probably way too much. All right. Interesting one that got submitted. What do I do if there's an office love triangle? Thank you for tuning in to today's episode. If you're finding the information on this podcast helpful and you're looking to take control of your career and start to elevate yourself to the next level, go ahead and check out our course. Go to bit.ly/career coach course to get signed up today and to start taking your career to the next level and navigate the secrets of the career game. I feel like I need a relationship coach to help me answer this one. So first off, don't date coworkers. Also, I'm incredibly hypocritical because my husband was a coworker and we dated and now we're married. So take that with a grain of salt. If you're going to date a coworker, if I were you, I would keep that to yourselves as long as possible, unless you thought you were going to get married. It causes a lot of unnecessary drama to have a bunch of your coworkers weighing in on your relationship. Just my advice. Also, if you're going to date people you work with, don't date multiple people that you work with. I feel like that goes without saying, but I'm going to say it because clearly it's happening somewhere. Don't date multiple people that you work with. If you're married, don't date people that you work with. Yeah, that's really all I have for that one. There's no other better advice that I have other than like, just don't make this mistake in the first place. How many times should we give people the benefit of the doubt when they say something unprofessional? Okay, once. I am the queen of saying something stupid. I say something stupid all the time. I do it all the time. It's one of my husband's favorite things to make fun of me for. One time of somebody saying something that comes across kind of the wrong way, cut them a little bit of slack. If it is a constant issue, they're constantly commenting on your age, your gender, your looks, your weight, your anything, especially if it's physical, but even your work ethic. If it is a constant thing and it is constantly being received wrong, if it happens more than once, it warrants a conversation. Now, There's a lot of differing opinions on how you handle those conversations. So I'll give you some of my favorites. So if you're quick-witted, which I'm not, I'm quick-witted after the fact. I'm not quick-witted in the moment. If you're quick-witted in the moment, have certain things prepared that you could say if somebody said something, especially if you're going to a meeting that you know the person has a proclivity to say something offensive. Come prepared with what an odd thing to say out loud. They're going to recognize the errors of their way really quickly with a comment like that. Or that doesn't seem like a work type conversation. Or is that somehow relevant to the work that we're trying to discuss? Right? Comments like that are not necessarily disrespectful. They're not, I can't believe you didn't say that. They're not argumentative, but they're just like, maybe we should think about the things we say in a nice way. Have some of those prepared if you're the type of person who would feel comfortable doing that in that situation. I am not that person. I'm going to be honest. I wish I was. I wish I was that person who would stand up in the meeting and be like, that's a stupid thing to say. I'm not. What I would do is I would schedule a one-on-one with that person and I would give my boss a heads up. So this is a little bit of CYA. I'd say, hey boss, notice Steve has made a few comments lately about my age. It's kind of making me uncomfortable. I want to give him the benefit of the doubt. So I'm going to have a conversation with him one-on-one about it on Thursday. I just wanted you to have a heads up about it ahead of time. This is really key because if Steve feels attacked and goes to HR or goes to your boss, they already know what's going on. Your boss is already aware and they're prepared to take your side if that conversation goes sideways. So always CYA, especially if you have a good relationship with your boss. If you don't have a good relationship with your boss, give HR a heads up. Okay. I'm not a huge fan of HR, but if it's bad enough that you need to, give HR a heads up. Then you're going to have a one-on-one conversation with that person and say, hey, I've noticed in the last few calls, you've made a couple of comments about my age. You said A, B, C. It really does kind of make me uncomfortable. And I'm not sure what the bearing is on the work that we're trying to solve, but I wanted to have a conversation with you. What are you trying to communicate with that? Odds are they're not trying to communicate anything, right? They're not. They just either said something stupid, they didn't mean it multiple times, which seems unlikely, or they don't feel comfortable working with somebody of your age and they don't know how else to communicate that. But a one-on-one conversation is your best shot at kind of nipping that in the bud. Like, hey, I really like working with you. I think you're really capable. You have a bunch of great knowledge about this, but it is making me very uncomfortable that you keep making comments like this. I wanted to give us the opportunity to talk about it. What are you trying to accomplish with that? I'm not suddenly going to get older or suddenly going to get younger. So what are we trying to do here? Right? Try to have that one-on-one conversation. Like I said, you need a CYA ahead of this call. And it depends on magnitude. All right. I have had conversations with people I worked with where I'm like, listen, I know you've gone behind my back to my boss to complain about me multiple times. If you have an issue, you need to come to me. I don't understand what you're trying to accomplish going behind my back when my boss is just going to come to me and ask me to fix it. I'd rather have a healthy working relationship with you. I have absolutely had that conversation multiple times in my career. Now, where this tips is if you are legitimately being abused at work verbally, or if you are being discriminated against at work verbally. Okay? If they make comments like, you don't know what you're talking about, you're a woman, or, well, never worked with a gay guy before. Interesting that you got this job. If they're saying comments like that, that's an HR offense. Done. Period. Report it to HR. Okay. I'm talking more about the one-off comments of I don't know, did you really think through that solution? That's like questioning your ability to do your job, right? Or wow, you're smart for somebody so young. I got that a lot. I still get that a lot, even though I'm younger than I look, or at least I like to hope so. Younger than I look, I get that a lot. Well, you don't know what you mean. You haven't been working that long. I'm like, well, actually, I'm working a long time. I have a lot of experience here, right? Every once in a while, it's not necessarily cause for HR, but if it's something that's discriminatory against you, you should absolutely open a case. Right. So I don't want anyone listening to this to think they can't go to HR with legitimate, significant discriminatory problems. They absolutely can. They absolutely should. I'm talking about the other situations where somebody's it's interesting to have a woman's perspective on this. And maybe they think they're being genuine, but you're hearing it and you're like, listen, we don't need to say that on the call. I appreciate you're trying to be positive. It wasn't a negative comment. Maybe we don't talk about that on calls. right? That's a very different situation, and we want to address that separately. All right. What do you do in the first 90 days when you're starting a new role? So this is a whole section of my coaching. I've made videos on this before. There are a couple things to target in your first 90 days on a new job. So first 30 days, you're going to meet as many people as possible. So I talked about this in an episode a few weeks ago on networking. When you are new to a job, it is the best time to network because you can use the excuse that I'm new and I'm just meeting people. It's great. It's an instant in with pretty much any seniority in any part of your company. Meet with lots of people. First 30 days, you should be meeting with everybody who is an influencer across your organization at all. This is in your team. This is outside of your team. This is outside of your organization. This is executives. Meet with everybody you possibly can where it's appropriate. If you want to know how to target the right people, go back and listen to the networking episode. We will tag it below. But you're going to want to meet a lot of people. That, complete your onboarding trainings and get up to speed on what is expected in your job. What are the success criteria? Now, a good boss should give you a 90-day plan of here's what's expected as you ramp. Most bosses don't. Good boss will, okay? You need to understand what are the KPIs, what are the criteria for success, what are the areas that they want you to make an impact the fastest. That's your goal to learn in the first 90 days, okay? 30 to 60 days, your goal is to make one significant recommendation. Just one. And this significant recommendation does not need to be overhauling a whole process or overhauling a whole team. This could be, hey, I'd like to set a recurring meeting to talk about this that's not on the calendar. That is significant. Hey, I'd like to revamp the way that we do our decks and create a more templatized process for the team to leverage. Would you be comfortable with me working on that? That is a significant impact. Okay. One thing though that you've noticed that you can improve on and you want to make that change. This could be a process change. This could be a system change. This could be a team change. This could be a mission, vision, strategy change. One significant impact. Depends on your level of seniority, what you're going to have access to. But regardless of your level, one impact in 60 days. By the end of your 90 days, you want to have followed through on that request and be implementing it. The reason that this is so important is because most companies have a 90-day policy that they can fire you for any reason in your first 90 days if it doesn't look like you're going to be a good fit. We want to prevent that. That requires having good relationships, a good network, making significant impact, and being able to follow through on it all within 90 days. So that's why we structure it this way. Second reason that we like to do this is because we want to build you a really strong reputation really quickly. Now, you don't need to overdo it if you're not a natural high performer. Okay, so here's what I mean. My personality type is I cannot not be busy. It is a blessing and a curse. I love to be busy and I love to be doing lots and lots of things. I like to have a huge scope. It's just my personality. I enjoy that. As a result, my 90 days will look very different from somebody who maybe wants to fly under the radar. They don't want to get promoted. They're comfortable at their current level. They don't like to be super busy and they just want to do a good job. That person's going to make one recommendation, one follow through. They're going to be set in their 90 days. Me, I'm probably going to do 20. That's just my personality. All right. So you're going to scale it based on your preferences where you're going with your career. Now, if you are someone like me, you want a reputation of a high performer because then you're going to go on to high perform for the next however long you're at the company. Okay. If you are not naturally a high performer, wants to get promoted quickly, that is fine. Every company needs people who are not high performers. It's not a bad thing. But it also means that you should not totally crush it in your first 90 days and then want to relax and chill after that. That's not going to happen. Curse of competency means if you do 52 different things your first 90 days, they're going to expect you to keep doing that, right? So pace yourself based on your average productivity level. Don't work a ton of overtime in your first 90 days you don't plan on maintaining. Establish your boundaries in those 90 days. Okay, my boundaries are I don't work past 4:30 because that's when my kids get home from school, and I don't work weekends. Now, there are times when I do both of those things because there's a heavy deadline, something needs to be fit, it's for the CEO, whatever. Every once in a while, I will break those boundaries. But for the most part, I don't. So I'm definitely not going to break them in the first 90 days because that sets a bad precedent for what I'm going to be willing to do later. Okay. Same is true of your emotional boundaries. And that's what I mean when I talk about this high performer mentality. If your emotional bandwidth is I cannot be doing multiple things at once, I need one project that I really crush, don't take on more than one project in your first 90 days. You're setting yourself up for failure. Same thing if you really like to be in lots of cross-collaborative meetings, that's your thing. Do lots of cross-collaborative meetings in the first 90 days. Show your skill set there. Show your communication skills there. Your first 90 days should give your boss a taste of how you're going to perform for the foreseeable future, not some fake, super amped up version of yourself that you can't maintain. We want to overdo it in the first 90 days because we want our boss to think really highly of us. But to be honest, as a coach, I would rather you get fired at 90 days because what you want and what the company wants are different than you absolutely crush it in your first 90 days, not be able to maintain it, and get fired a year later. That's a much worse experience for both of you. So in your first 90 days, you're going to meet lots of people. You're going to make one significant recommendation. You're going to follow through on that recommendation. You're going to establish and maintain your boundaries that you can, and establish and maintain a productivity that you can maintain. Those are your goals in those first 90 days. All right. We've got time for one more question, and this was a good one. How to appear more confident on a job. I know I can do my technical aspect, but I always come across as not confident in meetings. This is a hard one. All right. So many people struggle with this. This is a very common struggle for many. And some of this has to do with your natural energy type. Are you an introvert or an extrovert? Extroverts tend to appear more confident naturally. Now, interestingly, I'm actually an introvert. I have to turn it on, and then I have to go recover for 3 hours after. Okay. No, it doesn't seem that way because I run a social media business, but I am actually very introverted. When you want to appear confident on the job, there are a few tips and tricks that you can employ that will help you. Okay. So the first is the rule of threes. I give the rule of threes to everybody. It's like my favorite tip. It's a consulting thing. Love it or hate it. When you are discussing something, you want to try to always bucket yourself into 3 examples, 3 answers, 3 solutions, 3 options, 3. Okay. This does require a little bit of being able to think quickly on your feet. So a lot of the time when I answer questions, say somebody says, Kendall, why is the sky blue? I would say, well, there's primarily 3 reasons why the sky is blue. Now, I have not even gotten to the reasons yet, but I have said out loud there are 3, and I will force myself mentally to adhere to that. 3 reasons the sky is blue. First, light is refracting off the ocean, which appears blue, which causes the sky to appear blue. Also, if any of this answer is not scientifically correct, cut me some slack. Okay. Second, the sky appears blue because of the way the sun's rays reflect through the ozone layer. Thirdly, the sky appears blue because most of us who have color, I'm totally spacing on the word, things in our eyes that sense colors naturally default to blue, right? I'm making stuff up here, but I'm going to say there are 3 reasons, and then I'm going to force myself to stick to 3 reasons. This will decrease the amount of time you spend rambling. This will force your thoughts to organize and coalesce in a way that's easily digestible for other people. And it helps you sound really prepared. Because even though you weren't prepared before you started talking, now you sound like you had a whole answer ready for this, right? Start working in the rule of threes. And as you do this, you'll start to see other people do this a lot as well. So rule of threes is a big one. Second one is asking questions. People don't ask questions because we think it makes us appear not confident. Wrong. When we ask questions, what we are able to do is show our critical thinking skills through those questions. So we're talking about an AI and we're going to build it. It's going to be very complex. And you say, listen, how does this AI impact the capacity of the team? Does this actually save us money? Are we going to be able to reduce resources as this AI gets going? That shows your critical thinking skills. Is it going to have a workforce impact? Is it going to have a cost impact, a revenue impact? Like all of these are things in that question that show your confidence in your knowledge without you saying, it seems to me like we would have these impacts. Right? You don't always have to be the person talking. You can be the person asking, and that will also show a lot of confidence. We don't ask those questions because we don't want to be wrong. Asking the question actually shows confidence, your ability to interact with more people on more meetings. So sometimes I'll give people who are struggling with confidence the homework of ask a question on every meeting. Do it for the next week and see what happens. So that's another one. Third one is be the person to set an agenda and kick off a call. Most of the tone of a meeting gets set in the first 3 minutes. So if you're the person to say, hey, thank you guys so much for hopping on the call, really appreciate it. I'd love to give everybody a little bit of context of what we're trying to accomplish and go through the agenda before we start. The problem statement we're trying to solve is A. There's a few pieces of context we've gathered from all of our resources. Here they are. To go through today's agenda and be successful, I would like to talk about A, B, and C, and I've put the respective owners. So we'll start with A. Steve, what do you have on this? right? Now you have set the tone that you are competent because you are leading the meeting. You are the person who is stepping in to own it. You have set the tone for what's going to be discussed, how it's going to be discussed, who's going to discuss it. Most of the people who appear really confident on calls are the people who kick off calls. Again, something you'll start to notice as you go back to work and as you start to implement these things. So those are the 3 big things to help you appear more confident at work. The last thing is going to be a bonus fourth, is you do not have to defend your work for your work to be correct. Do not have to defend your work for your work to be correct. I come from a data background, a technology background. That's what I've done for my life, especially in that industry, but even in marketing, in healthcare. We have a tendency to want to defend our position. My data is right because, my answer is right because, my solution is right because, my way of doing it is right because. We want to defend and we want to be right. The reality is you can be right without having to defend yourself. Let other people ask their questions. Hey, thanks. That's a great question. I also thought about that, and here's the answer that I came up with. Does that resonate with you? Does that make sense to you? Hey, I appreciate that recommendation to change the process. I'm curious, how would that work in this situation? Do not jump straight to the defense. People who are confident never defend themselves. They push the team. They bring the team on a journey to the right solution together. People who are defensive tear down those relationships for the sake of being right, and that will hurt your career long term. So these are some of the questions you guys have been asking. Thank you so much for bringing these to me. If you have more questions, again, go to my website, pop those in there so that I can get back to you. You can also send them to me on Instagram and I will funnel them away for future episodes. But if you like today's episode, go ahead and give us 5 stars. Write any of your questions in the comments below. We'll be checking there as well. And as always, tune back in next week for our next episode.